Well, I consider this my BIA name, Burt Medicine Boy.
Okay, right.
But my Cheyenne name is Siktavaz, which means appears. And my grandfather's name was Whistling Eagle, Wakaniska. My grandmother's name was Annie Medicine Law, and her Cheyenne name was Isheva. And I grew up with them for the first 12 years of my life. Well, I'll take it back from 5 until I was 12. That's about 7 years. In Bernie, along the Tun River, on the southern part of the reservation. My parents are Burt Medicine Bowl Sr. His name is Ishut Rising Sun. And my mother's name is Ellen. Her Cheyenne name is Across Killing Woman. And I grew up along the banks of the Tun River with my grandparents. We did a lot of our own gardening. We ate a lot of lean meats, vegetables. We harvested plums, fruit cherries, blueberries, buffalo berries. Picked a lot of turnip, wild turnips. So we were always packing things for the winter, always. And we lived in a little shack about this size, 20 by 16 or something like that, with a dirt floor. My grandma and grandpa and my uncle Wayne Hetz lived. And so they're the ones that, my grandfather was the one that really pushed me to learn the English language, because I didn't know the English language when I first went to school. First through 3rd grade, but middle of the year of 3rd grade, I finally started picking up the English language. But he's the one that really pushed me to learn it, and also would say, you're going to need this language to get your education. And you need the education to get yourself a job. And that's what I always thought about. And then as I started getting older and I was at the Catholic school at St. Lebrain, I would always see teachers leaving every year. And one day I thought to myself, well, you know, I'd sure like to come back and stay here and be stable. Be here year after year for the students. And that's pretty much what made me decide to become a teacher, was stability. And so graduated as a non-traditional student at 40 years old. But I have a really strong passion for teaching. Excuse me. And then I thought, well, maybe I can change the attitude and the atmosphere of the whole school by becoming an administrator. And I did that. I became an administrator, elementary principal. Had 2 good years, and then decided to go teach Cheyenne language, because I always wanted to teach the language. And I passed my Class 7 certification, which is a language certification, to be able to teach language with a perfect score, 100%. So now I teach 4 levels of Cheyenne language at Chief Donai College. I also teach Cheyenne Oral Traditions 1 and 2. And that's what I do at the college. And I've been there 2 years, as my wife says. Come January, it'll be 2 years.
Right. All right, Burt, I appreciate that. It's a very good background. In terms of schools, then, you went to school at, were you at home, or did you go to a boarding school then for a time?
I went to St. Labray boarding school from first grade until I was a sophomore in high school. And then I went to Pasco at the Tri-City areas in Washington State, right along the Columbia River. That's where I graduated from in 71.
Okay.
1971. And then 20 years later, 91, I graduated with a bachelor's in elementary ed and a Native American Studies minor. And then I worked a year at St. Labray, and then I worked a year at Little Wound School in Kyle, South Dakota. Then I came back to Lame Deer and worked for 3 years. And we had a big old strike there, and I was kind of targeted when the local education association voted me in to be the president. The administration was starting to target me on some of the activities that we did. So rather than putting up with that harassment, I resigned and got a job at Little Wound School, middle school, as a math and science teacher. So I worked there for 5 years, and then a job opened up at Chief Dull-Knife College at the National Science Foundation called the Rural Systemic Initiative Project, which was to make parents, teachers, boards aware of the importance of teaching science, technology, engineering, and math to not only just Native Americans, but also to girls, young girls, trying to get them interested in that area. And then while I was at Little Wound, I started my master's program in leadership and school administration. So in 2007, I got my master's. So that's my educational field. I'm also the one of the AHEC fellows.
The thing that we're kind of really interested in, and we'll kind of start out big and then move more narrowly, is to talk first of all about animals. And as I mentioned to you, a lot of the Lakota people that I've been speaking with will say that the Lakota relationship with animals, or the way they view animals, is different than the way mainstream society looks at animals. Is that true for the Cheyenne? Do they think about, or does the language refer to them differently than maybe mainstream society does? Any reaction to that?
Yes. We have a ceremony. Well, we have a few ceremonies. And in those ceremonies, there's different birds and animals. Even a mouse or some insect will come into an individual's vision. And they either get a message or they come as their spiritual helper for the rest of their life. So when they go fast, they can be out in the hills or at Bear Butte, where the sacred mountain is for the Cheyenne people. They fast there, and probably on the third night, or probably on their fourth fast, they finally get a vision of either maybe a buffalo or a wolf or a horse or an insect or butterfly will come to them, or a bird, maybe an eagle or hawk, or might be even a meadowlark. You know. But yeah, we have lots of reverence towards the birds and the animals. We call them the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds, and the insects. So they come in those forms.
Okay. If you look at like the creation story in Genesis, for example, it talks about humans having dominion, control over animals. And there really doesn't any sense that animals have a soul or anything like that. They're just kind of whatever humans want to use them for. the Lakotas I've spoken to say that's not the relationship. It's more like their instructors or their relatives or something like that. Does that sound similar to the Cheyenne?
Really similar, because they teach us lessons, and they also tell us if we need some kind of a spiritual guidance, they come and appear and they talk to us. Our belief is that, they speak our language and they can understand us. So when we pray in our language, we also pray to the animals too for their help. And I know that some of the animals, when we do a ceremony, we like when we go hunting, we do a little ceremony, and we'd ask for the animal to give itself up so we could have something to eat. And sure enough, that would happen. We would see a deer or something like that. We'd offer the tobacco to the badger spirit, who's in control of all the underground, and would carry out different ways to help us to bring these deer to our to the road, or to bring the deer so that we could shoot them, and then we'd have food. And that, I've seen a lot of that happen with not only my grandfather, but with my dad too. And then we use sage we'd brush off the rifle on each other so we wouldn't get what you would call buck fever, that missed the deer,
Right.
We'd have a true aim and a true kill so we could have something to eat.
The Lakota talk about when they go on a buffalo hunt that the same kind of thing, they have to do the appropriate prayer in the front end. And then the buffalo the one that's to be hunted, will separate from the rest and allow itself to be shot. So that sounds kind of similar.
That's what we do too.
Yeah. Is there something afterwards? I know sometimes they share liver, or they do kind of an apology or thank you afterwards. Is there a prayer that is common then, or?
There's what we call given to the badger spirit. We get a piece of the liver and we dip it in that bile, and we take it out and offer it to the badger and thank him for the food that we got, and thank the buffalo spirit for giving up its life.
You told me, you were beginning to tell me a story, and there's a similar one in the Black Hills about the racetrack Red Road, but it was a good story about different animals and their relationship.
Yeah.
Would you share that story with me?
Sure. Back in the olden days, everybody, when I say everybody, I mean the animals, the birds, insects, the humans, they all got along and they all understood each other. They were all living in harmony until one day the buffalo decided that he wanted dominance, to be able to eat flesh from different people and animals to get its strength from them, and wanted dominance. And so all the animals got together, and the insects and the birds and the humankind, and said, well, let's have a great race, and whoever wins will be the one to be dominant. So at that time, when they came together, all the animals, the insects, the birds, they were all the same color until that time. And then that's when all of them picked the color they are today. They painted themselves the way they are today. I'll give you like the meadowlark. He said, I'm going to paint myself yellow, and I'm going to sing to the sun. If we lose the race, I'm going to sing to the sun every time. And that's what he does. If you look at the meadowlark, when he sings, he'll lift his head up and sing to the sun. Or like the coyote, he said, I'm going to paint myself kind of whitish, grayish, and maybe tannish, sometimes. And when the humans, when I see humans, he says, I'll run a little bit and I'll stop and I'll look back at them. And that's what the coyote does. If you see a coyote, it'll run and then stop and look back at you. So those are just 1, 2 examples that they said they would do, The magpie painted himself in a cloak, black cloak with black, and a cloak and a white, black and white. And because of that cloak, he said, they'll swoop up and down like this. And that's what he does. He doesn't have a real straight flight. He goes up and down. His down flight is quick. So they had the big race. We call it the Great Race. And it happened somewhere around there by what we call Buffalo Gap. And there's a big red road goes around. You can see that. You can still see it. If you climb up on the top of the mountain and look down, you can definitely see a road, what we call the racetrack, that they produced when they were running. So they had the great race, and there was 4 birds that sided with the Cheyennes, the humankind, I should say, back then. It was the hawk, the eagle, the magpie, and the vulture. So the buffalo had a female buffalo, a slender woman buffalo. Slender woman, they called her name, because she was a fast runner and a distant runner. So they had to go around this track 1 round. So the man ran on the outside because some of the animals had advised him that if you choose the inside, the buffalo's going to squish you against the mountainside. So he chose the outside lane. So they ran the race, and when you get really close to the finish line, this female buffalo was spitting out red froth from its mouth, and it would blow like that. Wherever it landed, that's where you get the red paint that we use. It comes from the buffalo. Bloody froth from its mouth. And so, which we call, the Cheyennes call it the earth color, the earth people. And then, so they were getting close to the finish line, and the magpie came swooping down and landed on the buffalo's horn. And just as it got close, the buffalo flew off, or the magpie flew off and did his thing. He went up and then swooped down, and he came across before the female buffalo did. And so today, the humans have dominion over the animals and birds and insects, and the eagle and the hawk, they're predatory birds. They're hunters, and they eat meat. And the magpie and the vultures are scavengers. They eat whatever is died out in the field somewhere. Today they eat a lot of roadkill.
Right.
So yeah, that's the great race, we call it.
Then in Cheyenne, let's. What is each of those referred to? Is there a phrase for the great race in Cheyenne? Okay.
Where they had the race.
Where
That's
they
what
had.
that means.
Okay, and then each of the participants, then, term for buffalo is in Cheyenne is.
There's 2 terms.
Okay.
We have the male buffalo is called hodoa. The female buffalo is isuvuna.
Okay. Yeah. Is that true for all animals, or just for the buffalo where there's a male and a female?
It's true for just the buffalo.
Just a buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay. And
So we designate male or female just by saying male or female. If it's a male, we say hitaneha, meaning a male animal, male dog or wolf,
okay.
or female he'eha, meaning it's a female.
Okay.
So we designate the gender.
Is that that prefix? Is that also with human beings? Then is
Yes.
it a male? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, it's more like they're another nation or another people.
Yes, but for the man it's heta, and for the woman it's he.
Okay.
So there's changes in there for the human designation and for the animals.
Okay. What about tongue? If you said, do you make a distinction if it says human tongue as opposed to buffalo tongue? Is there a distinction?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So a male buffalo tongue would be what?
We would just call it a buffalo tongue.
Okay.
Otoa vitano.
Okay. And then the human tongue.
Vitano, just a tongue.
Just tongue. Okay. Very good. Now, and then each one of the animals, hawk in Cheyenne is.
Hawk is ano.
Okay. And then magpie.
Magpie is moe.
Okay. And there was vulture. And phrase for vulture is.
That's a hard one. Because we don't use that every day.
Because we have those turkey vultures too,
Yeah.
those red-necked
Yeah.
ones. Yeah. Maybe you'll think of that.
I'll
one.
think about it later.
Yeah. And then, what was the other bird, though? Was it meadowlark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meadowlark is hinochias.
Okay.
And then we got two words for eagle. One is nits, and then the other one is wocha.
And what's the difference?
Wocha is the one with the black tip. And nits is the one with the bald eagle.
Okay.
tail.
Do the Lakota use the term spotted eagle a lot? Is that does spotted eagle any uniqueness? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's because of the
Nits wowohas, it's spotted eagle.
okay. And now let's talk about just birds for a while. And if any attribute kind of comes to mind when you think of any kind of behavior. As I listen to the Lakota, when they talk about birds, they seem like they have a role that birds always have some kinds of responsibilities that are different than other animals. Is that true of the Cheyenne? Is there any special role that they have? Like they'll talk about the thunderbird and the eagle and even doves and small birds. They all have this kind of responsibility. Does that?
More of a, they seem to appear when the men go fasting and they become their spiritual helpers.
Okay.
That's more of what they do. So they use their powers for healing. Okay. And that's what the significance of a bird is to the Cheyenne.
Okay. Are there thunder beings within Cheyenne?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you refer to them in English as like the thunderbird, or do you call them thunder beings? If
we call them Helmanisto, meaning the spirits that make noise up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that it's probably very complicated, but I mean, is there just a general idea that's associated with the thunder beings or those beings? I mean, do they bring the rain, or is that a power that you would?
There's some people that have that power to bring the rain or the wind. But yeah, we pray to them to bring the rain for us.
Okay. How about eagles? Do they have when you think of eagles and the Cheyenne, like the Lakota, will use in regalia will use feathers, eagle feathers, and those. What do you think of when you think of eagles then?
They're the messengers to the Great Spirit. Our word for God or Great Spirit is Mahaya. So they are the ones that carry the prayers to the Great Spirit. Now, if the story with the drum, you know, when the animals all came together, they all kind of were designated different, like you're saying, powers, and they gave each other their paint. So they also have some responsibility. And so when the Great Spirit, Mahaya, brought these spirits together and said, I need you to tell me what your job's going to be. So they all mentioned their jobs. The badger spirit would carry the prayers on his back and give it to the eagle. In turn will take it to the Great Spirit. Well, while they were having this meeting, they could hear something going boom, boom. And pretty soon it was here. And the Great Spirit said, what are you going to do? And what are you? And he says, I'm the drum spirit. And I'm going to be with the people so that when they use the drum, I can bring these songs to you because they're praying with the songs. They're singing the song, which is a prayer song, and I can bring them to you. And also this drum represents, you know, awe, excitement, strength. It also represents mothers. I'm going to represent the Mother Earth's heartbeat, a heartbeat of a nation too. So, yeah, they each had a different role. And the badger spirit was also was in charge of putting everything to sleep in the fall. So all the things that go to sleep lose their leaves. You know, the trees lose their leaves. The different brush that come, the annuals, I guess they call them in scientific term. And he's in charge of it in the spring, in working together with the thunder spirits. When the thunder comes back, and the thunder and the rain, and the thunder shakes up Mother Earth and wakes her up. And Mother Earth in turn tells the badger spirit, go wake up all the plants and all the animals that hibernate. You go wake them up because the spring has arrived. You know. So they all have different jobs. A magpie was a good a bird that knew where all the meat would be. And the one thing that we never mentioned in Cheyenne stories about birds is the owl. You know, the owl is a bringer of bad, which means that someone's going to die in the family. And our belief is that if it lands like on someone's house, that a member of that family is going to die. So there's some ways that we try to if we see that right away, we talk to the family and we do a ceremony. We call it a wiping with a cloth ceremony. We wipe everything off, wipe the persons off, and they go in the house and cedar bless it, smudge it with cedar smoke, so that we pray that won't happen. But sometimes you don't get a chance to do that, and someone loses their life in that family, you know. And that's the spirit, that's the owl's job to us, You know, is a bringer is a bad omen, bringer of bad news.
You know, the Lakota are similar in some ways. They emphasize the harbinger, the saying that you need to be alert and you need to take action, like the ceremony you're talking about. So it's not always certain that someone will die, but it's very close indication kind of thing. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting because all tribal peoples have a little different view, you know, and clearly the badger is of greater significance, I think, to Cheyenne than other tribal peoples. Why do you suppose in regalia? Why are there so much use of feathers? Do you ever thought about that, or what feathers are being used there? I mean,
well, it's to help the man wearing them. First of all, to get that spirit. They actually get into that spirit of that bird, and it helps them to dance easily.
Much more gracefully.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it helps them with strength too and endurance while they're dancing. It also helps. It's kind of an aerobic exercise. You know, it keeps you dance for health. I'm gonna start dancing.
Okay.
And I have the eagle feathers and stuff.
Okay. Are there other now with competitions and stuff? It's a little bit different,
yeah.
but traditionally, like with some Lakota, they'll wear turkey feathers instead because they'll be concerned about the issue or but generally it is eagle feathers. But sometimes there are the other kind of feathers that are other birds. Are there other birds that come to mind when people might use their feathers?
No.
It's pretty much
hawk and eagle feather.
Right, and the shape of the bustle and some of that. I've heard that in some of the dances, they're referring to the movements of like the prairie chicken or some of that. Is that similar then in Cheyenne? Yeah. To try to emulate the grace of that experience. Yep. All right. What generally amongst the Lakota, they have kind of, not to say it was a taboo, but it's like you don't eat, like you wouldn't eat an eagle and you wouldn't eat certain birds. That would not be considered appropriate. Is that true with Cheyenne? Like badger?
True.
Would you hunt badger?
No.
No.
We don't. They're a powerful spirit, even though it's a representation of a good luck, and is in control of everything that I just mentioned.
Right.
But we don't hunt it, nor do we eat that. And that's the same for like eagle or hawks or magpies or anything like that. The only thing we eat is like what you mentioned, the prairie chicken.
Right.
Or the pheasants.
Right.
Of course, pheasant is an import from China, you know. So.
Sure. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because that shows a different level of respect or responsibility to other animals that you wouldn't hunt. The Lakota have kind of a strange or different attitude about bear because bear grease is very good medicine, but it's not like they always hunt the bear. That's kind of like a little bit of a question mark there, you know. Now badgers and eagles and hawks you wouldn't hunt.
No.
Other animals that come to mind that you wouldn't normally hunt, or would?
That's about it.
That's about it.
Yeah. Because they're held in reverence.
Right. Then stories about bears, and bears. The tribal communities have all kinds of different ideas about bears. What would you say the Cheyenne say about bear?
Just another meat.
Is it another? Yeah. The Lakota have this bear grease as for medicines and things. Is that commonly used with the Cheyenne? Does that have any special?
I think they use that mostly for like using with putting on with the paint.
Okay.
If you use it with that paint, it works really well.
Right. Right.
The paint is vibrant.
Okay.
But I don't. I've never heard of anyone using that, nor used in a ceremony. Maybe it wasn't. It just wasn't passed on.
Right.
Just like my grandfather, he had what you would call horse medicine, and he got that through fasting at Bear Butte. And then when he would go help and doctor people, he would kind of grunt like a horse before he started his healing.
Right.
Yeah.
They also, horses are very interesting because they would tell stories about singing or getting horses to dance.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard stories like that? Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have horses like that too.
Yeah.
Horses that did certain things for the people.
Right. They told me an interesting story about the horses having gone away for a while and then coming back. Is there anything like that with the Cheyenne? Did they, or is there a special relationship with horses?
I don't think we have a story where they've left, but we have a story where the animals have left. All the animals that they used for eating, they all left. And it had to do with some taboo they did within the tribe. And so the animals all left. And the only ones that stayed around were the pack animals they used to have. They had animals before they had the horses. So when all the animals left, they ran out of their food, meat. So they started to eat the dogs. And they got to the last dog that was owned by a little boy. And this dog told him in a dream, he told him, "You need to leave because they're going to kill me and eat me." So he had this dream. So he got up and he left with the dog. And while he was gone, when he went to bed, he had a dream. And in this dream, this spirit came to him and said, "You need to tell the people not to eat this dog because this dog's going to help you in all through your life, through generations. This dog's going to be there for you. But you can feed him this." And he had buffalo hump there. And when he woke up, there was a buffalo hump laying next to him. So he took this buffalo hump to the people and he said, "I had a dream and the spirit brought this buffalo hump to us. But you can't eat this dog because we're going to use it." And in that dream, he also told them that they're going to use this dog in the ceremony, in the sun dance ceremony. I told them on the 4th day of the sun dance, when they bring this dog suit in, that it covers all the food that are represented there. So that's what he told the people. So the only time we're ever going to eat a dog again is on the 4th day of the sun dance. Sacred.
What is the Cheyenne term for dog then?
Oshkis.
Okay, and what is the term for horse?
Moata.
Okay.
When the Cheyenne people first saw a horse, they didn't quite know what it was, but it looked like the size of an elk. So the closest thing they could think of was, well, it looks like an elk, but it's friskier.
Okay.
Because you know how they're grand and move kind of slow. While this horse, when they saw it, they gave it a name, Frisky Elk. Boy, that's what that means.
Okay, frisky elk. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. Then with the dog, dog is occasionally eaten by Lakota, but they're usually with a ceremony or something. Is that true with Cheyenne?
Just in the Sundance ceremony.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Part of what I like the folks to talk about is they want the brochure is kind of also for children, and usually they have a comment about if children want to know more about animals, what should they do, or what should children think about when they think about animals? Does that strike anything in your mind? If you had a chance to tell a child, you're interested in animals, you should do this. Does that make any sense at all? Or
back when I was at my age, that would probably happen. If they were really interested in animals and we say, well, this is what you need to do to get their favor. But now that doesn't happen. Now it's just, a lot of this has been forgotten, or it hasn't been passed down. A lot of the knowledge that the old people used to have about this exact thing you're talking about.
right.
And so whenever we lose someone, we lose history, we lose tradition. We lose all the stories that individual has, and plus whatever skill he had in creating something traditional. Took it with him, and didn't leave it, or didn't pass it on. I know that's what's happened to us. We used to be what we call the star people. We used to live up in the heavens as stars. And then we came down to Mother Earth. We lived underground, ate all the roots and all the animals that lived on the ground except for the badger. And so when we transformed into human form, we used Mother Earth's color to color ourselves, the brown, and we're in a 5-point star. That's our belief. Came above ground, we started living this life first of all, as sedentary people living in earthen lodges. First we were living in a cave, and then we moved to earthen lodges, and then we became buffalo people, buffalo hunters, living in teepees because they were mobile. You could move quickly. So, yeah, so those stories, the reason I mention this is maybe this great spirit of ours wanted us to forget when we were out there. Because today I don't recall any stories from my grandparents about the constellations or any of the stars. The only thing they would say is pick a bright star and pray to that star to help you throughout your life. Always go out at night and pray to that star. So, but we have stories about stars, like fallen star and different things like that.
You know that because the Blackfeet also have, all of them have some cosmology, some study of the stars, and they talk about the teepee as being a mirror, because the teepee top is like the mirror on the top side to these stars, and then there's the earth-bound side of that, though. So, and that's interesting, that whole cosmology.
Oh, like our eyesight. Huh? Everything's upside down, but yet it's right side up.
Right. And that's I like that observation. I'm kind of trying to ask the question, so I'm not telling you what I'm looking for, but that is a very good point. If you want to learn about animals, it would be good to hear stories about animals. Some of them have also talked about observation, that animals, we are so in our own heads all the time that we don't go out and observe the animals, and that you could learn a lot from that. And one of the guys I was talking to was saying, well, it's interesting that you know all about the animals in Africa, but what kind of tree do you have outside? What kind of animal do you lives in lives in your yard? You don't even know, and it would be good to observe that.
Yeah.
to go out and take a look at that.
In my Cheyenne language classes, I teach the animals that I see here. And that's all I teach. If they want to learn about other animals that you don't see here, then it's their prerogative.
Right, right.
But, so those stories that you're talking about were not either passed on or they were just simply forgotten for a little boy or girl that's interested in something like that.
Right.
Well, now we have another, I don't know what you would call it, something that's occupies them, and that's their iPads and their phones, and they're busy texting, and all observation has gone down just to that phone or the hearing. You sit outside and you listen, and you can hear a lot of things, especially if you go out to the hills and you sit down and just listen. You can hear lots of different animals, and you can hear chipmunks, or you can hear a coyote yipping, or eagle, or bird. If you do that, you sit there and you listen and just observe. Or you can see things, A lot of these new generation, they don't have that.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty. I thought a very important point, because you just, unless it's, sometimes you think if it doesn't come out of your iPad or if it doesn't come from school teacher or something like that, then it's not worth knowing.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, if you just go out and observe for yourself, you can learn a lot.
Yeah.
And now biologists, I mean, that's why this ornithologist is interested, because he wants to know, are there behavioral things that are in the oral tradition that they can learn about the behavior of animals. Like with the magpie, the Lakota have all kinds of different stories about magpies kind of being not so much, not a trickster, but more of a clown, and then it'll try to land on a branch and it kind of falls off the branch, and that it also will tell everybody where the meat is at, so it kind of tattles.
Yeah.
And so they have these kind of personality things that are associated with the magpie. And a biologist will look at that and say, that's some interesting information about the animal that we didn't really recognize, and then the behavior of its flying and stuff. That's very interesting stuff. What about insect people or nations, or are they the same as all other creatures then? I mean, ants?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay.
So, like we have an individual uncle. I have an uncle named Nakohoke, which means bear mouse. The mouse had a powerful spirit too. Hoke, mouse woman. So mouse had, even though it's tiny, it's a rodent. It still had powers within our tribe. The way they experienced that, maybe through vision and stuff like that. And then the main insect that comes to being is like the dragonfly. It's used quite a bit in our ceremonies, and we have the dragonfly design in the sun dance. We use that in our design. Dragonfly in our language just means evolve with us. It's because it goes so fast, they stir up a whirlwind. So they call them whirlwind, evolve with us.
That's interesting, because dragonfly they mentioned that a lot too, and it was they one of them talked about seeing more dragonflies on dancers now, and it was a warrior. It was associated with warriors because of how quickly a dragonfly can move
Mm-hmm.
in so many directions so quickly.
Yeah.
That is, she described it as humans being very frail, and that you need to rely on the animals,
Yeah.
and you try to emulate them in order to have their skill. Because if you really think about it, humans, compared to most animals, are pretty weak.
Yeah.
So would the dragonfly, you're saying in ceremony, you're seeing that more. Is it similar representation than it would be the skill of the dragonfly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then what does the mouse then, what would be a general statement you would say about the mouse? What is its skill set or ability?
Ability to gather food.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How about in the Southwest, they talk a lot about ants being very industrious and that they can carry a lot of weight. Are there any
It's
stories?
the same thing. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're. You see, my grandfather used to tell me, look at that ant. Look at what it's carrying. It was carrying something bigger than him.
Right.
He said, look at him. It's getting ready for the winter time. He would always tell me, look at them, how they work together. Everybody pitches in. That's the way we need to live. That's the way we have to live, he would say.
Right.
Don't be like this over here. Don't be like this grasshopper. There's that grasshopper just flies around and does nothing
Right.
and dies. He says, this is when the cold gets here, he starves to death, he said.
Right. But they say the same thing about buffalo. The buffalo, very communal animal, and protects its young, and sets up these kind of skirmish lines, kind of thing when some predator attacks it, and that you can learn about communal behavior by watching the buffalo. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And then just to mention some animals, a robin. Does a robin signify anything significant?
Just that at the great race, he says, I'm going to paint my breastplate red so that people can see the beauty of our creation, and I'll sing a pretty song.
Okay.
When they hear that, they can feel good.
Right. The Lakotas will talk about robins as a sign of spring.
Yeah.
That things will change.
Yeah. That's exactly how we see it.
Yeah.
A coming of a change.
Right. Right.
A positive.
A positive change. They have stories about crows. The one that they seem to always bring up was the crow they captured a crow and then they started cooking it and it turned it black, and then it was able to escape from the fire, which was kind of interesting. Any stories about crows that come?
We don't have too many stories about crows.
Right.
Just that we call them stealers.
Okay.
Like they steal food.
Camp robber.
Camp robber
Yeah.
type thing.
Right. Right. Okay. I think that pretty much covers all the stories, all the animals that was coming to mind. And you covered the owl and some of the... is there anything about the prairie chicken other than to emulate its dance? Is there...
They used to have what we call the sunrise dance. They'd line up in a half circle and they'd dance. Then the sun came up.
Okay.
But I've never seen that. I never saw that type of a dance in my life. I sure wish I could.
Right.
But we have that same dance in the morning with the sun dance. The sun dancers all line up outside the sun dance, and they face the east, and we start the song. They call it the sunrise song.
Right.
And so it looked like the sun plays tricks, it comes up and it goes back down.
Right.
It finally, slowly comes up. When it's fully up, then they stop the dance.
Yeah, I've heard some Eastern Indians talk about prayers or songs to help the sun, to try to help it break free from the earth as it comes up. Yeah, that's interesting.
That's what they.
Yeah.
So that sunrise song, that's what it does, you know.
Right. Right.
I was able to sing a few times at the sunrise song. I sang all night, and then they got the dancers outside the lodge and lined them up, and we started that song.
And then it came up.
It took about 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
That's a long time for us to sing.
To sing, yeah. Do as is true everywhere, I think everywhere, when an eagle feather drops at an event, there's a ceremony for that. How would you interpret that from a Cheyenne perspective? Why is...
You're negating another warrior, fallen warrior. So you undo it, they say, because you're going counterclockwise. So if it falls, you know, Cheyennes dance clockwise. But if it falls, then you get all the warriors, and they dance counterclockwise, 4 rounds. And then they pick it up.
Okay.
And they get a veteran to pick it up, a warrior to pick it up. So that negates a warrior, a future warrior falling.
Right. The Lakota talk about when it falls, because the feather is kind of alive itself, that it's kind of leaping off of someone, that they're kind of, and so they're embarrassed by that, and they have to do an appropriate thing to do right by the feather. Yeah. Is that similar then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all the. Yeah. Oh, the other one that they always have, the trickster. Is it for Lakota? Is Iktomi a spider? Is their trickster?
We have coyote.
Coyote. Yeah.
Coyote's a trickster.
Yeah. The Northwest Coast have raven.
Yeah.
And but coyote is pretty much plateau northern plains up in here. What is the coyote referred? What's the word for coyote?
Oh,
okay. And
meaning when you say "neokomehe" means you're like a coyote. You're sneaky.
Right.
You know, and that's what he is. He's sneaky, but he's always getting into trouble.
Right.
You know, mischief, and we got lots of stories about coyote.
Okay.
You know, probably similar to the ones like magpie or
the Iktomi spider.
Iktomi.
Yeah. So that's that they'll say, you know, that lawyers are coyotes or something, or they'll make a joke about that. So, but sometimes they will do good things, or they show you how to behave.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
There are morals to the stories.
Morals to the stories. Right.
What not to do.
Right. So when they say Iktomi, it also means spider, but usually when they say Iktomi, they're talking about a trickster. Is that true when you hear coyote?
Yeah.
So is there any distinction in the language between coyote just as an animal or coyote as a trickster, or is it's pretty much the same?
There's a, when you talk about coyote, you're talking about the animal, but sometimes people, you know, they'll say, well, I saw this coyote, there's kind of wrong, and they'll say, who's that, your brother-in-law, you know, something like that.
Right. Does Iktomi can transform? Can coyote change?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And appear as somebody else or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's very much like raven. Raven's like that on the Northwest Coast, because he'll wear his garment and then he'll change himself into something else, and you'll think he's someone else. Shapeshifter, yes. Very good.
Yeah.
All right.
And a good liar.
Yeah.
And a good, what we call it, sugarcoats his words, just to get in good with you, and then slap you in the face.
Then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
That's very good. I like that. So, all right. Did you remember any other ones? Or no, that was good. See, he's listening though. That's good. So at least one kid's listening.
Yeah.